Welcome back to Monster Tamer, a 2D Pokemon-like RPG created Phaser 3. Previously, we continued working on our saving and loading functionality, and we focused on updating our title scene to have our start new game and our continue game functionality. So then that way when the player saves their game in our world scene, they can pick back right up where they left off. If you missed the previous videos, there'll be links in the video description to the source code up to this point, as well as the complete source code for this video. There will also be a link to previous videos if you'd like to catch up. So let's get started. So the next thing we need to do is we're going to work on updating our data manager to start persisting some data about the monsters that we currently have. And so long term, this is going to be data like the monsters that are currently in our party. It'll be monsters that we have stored away so we can retrieve them later. And so this will have our monsters metadata like their current attack, their current health, level, all of that information. And so what we'll be looking to do is enhance our data manager to have some of our monster data attributes stored there, and then we can go ahead and replace like our data in our battle scene with a reference to our data manager. So to go ahead and get started, let's go ahead and come over to our code and let's jump over to our data manager. So the first thing we want to do is we want to enhance our state for our data manager to include information about our monster data. So to do this, we'll come above our global state and we're going to make another type definition. And we're going to go ahead and make this an object that can have various keys for like monsters in party, monsters in bank, or whatever we want to call it later. And so what we'll do is we'll copy the first part of this code here. Let's go ahead and paste it. And we're going to go ahead and change this. We're going to call this monster data. And then so for our object, we need to go ahead and add our property. And so we're going to go ahead and call this in party. And what we'll do on this is we're going to reference our monster data type. And so we're just going to do monster, and we'll pull that from our type definition, and this is going to be an array. So then down in our global state, what we'll do is we're going to go ahead and add in our monsters as a property here. So let's go ahead and copy this line here. And for our type, this is going to be our monster data type that we just added. And we're just going to change this to be monsters. So then what we can do is down in our initialized state, let's go ahead and add in our new properties. We have monsters, this is going to be an object, and we have in party, and we know this is going to be an array. And then next we'll need to go ahead and add in our key for our new property. So let's go ahead and copy this here. We'll go ahead and add that in, and we're going to call this monsters in party. And now we just need to go ahead and update our data manager to have our new property and our various methods. So let's go ahead and come down to where we update our data manager. And we'll go ahead and grab our new key. So we'll have our data manager store keys. We'll have monsters in party. And this is going to be equal to our data, our monsters, and then in party. Then we'll come down where we copy our data to a global state object. We'll add in our new monsters and do our in party. And for this, we're going to do our store. And we're going to do get, and we want to go ahead and get our data manager store keys, and we're going to get monsters in party. And so what we'll do for this is we're going to go ahead and make a clone of it. And so we're just going to go ahead and use our spread operator to make a copy of the array that's returned. And one last thing we need to do is we need to come up to our start new game method, and we are going to go ahead and reset our monster data back to our initial state. And then that way if we start a new game, our monsters would be back at full health. And so we'll do existing data, we'll do monsters is going to be equal to our in party, and we will start off with our initial state. We're just going to make a copy. We'll do initial state, monsters, and in party. So now we update our data manager, we need to go ahead and add in our initial starting monsters. So what we'll do is let's jump over to our battle scene. And when we create our initial player monster, what we'll do is we're going to go ahead and copy our monster details from here. We're going to move that over to our data manager. So what we'll do is we're going to copy our monster details for our active player monster. So let's just go ahead and grab this whole object here. And if we jump back to our data manager, when we set our initial monsters in our party, we'll go ahead and paste in our monster there. Let's go ahead and add in our import for our asset key so we can reference Iguanodite. And then what we'll do is back in our battle scene, instead of having our data here, we're going to go ahead and grab this from our data manager. So to go ahead and do that, let's go ahead and remove this code here. And what we'll do is we're just going to do our data manager. We're going to do our store, and we'll use the get method to grab data. And so let's do our data manager store keys, and we're going to do monsters in party. And because we know we're returning an array, we're just going to grab our first monster in our array. All right, so if we want to go ahead and test our changes, the first thing we're going to do is let's go ahead and clear out our local storage. So in our browser, if we go into our console, if we go ahead and do local storage, and we call the clear method, this is going to reset all of our data. And if we go ahead and refresh our browser, we should see our continue option go away. And what we're doing here is we're just making sure our data gets reset with our new initial data in our data manager. So now what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to start a new game, and let's go ahead and save. So now we should have our data persisted, and if we jump over to our preload scene, what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to transition right into our battle scene. So if we let the scene refresh, we should now be in our battle scene, and what should happen is we should see the wild enemy monster, and we should see Iguana Knight still appear, and everything still appears to be working properly. Alright, so then back in our preload scene, let's go ahead and switch back to title scene. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and make some enhancements to our monster data type. And what we're going to do is we're going to add some IDs to our data. And so what we're going to do is we want to give a unique ID to a particular monster type. So like for all Iguana Knights, this would be like monster ID 1. And then later on, we could use that to do things like look up this monster's data inside a monster dex, where we have more general details on this monster type. And then we'll also want to add in a unique ID for this particular monster. Typically in most monster catching games, you can catch more than one type of a particular monster. And so we would need a unique identifier for this particular monster that we have in our party. And then that way later on, like if I had 3 Iguana Knights and one of them's at level 2, one's at level 3, one of them's at half health, just when we're referencing that data, we'll know which monster that we actually need to update our data for. So we go ahead and jump over to our type definition file. What we'll do is let's come up to our monster data. So we just need to go ahead and add in 2 new properties. So let's just copy this line here. We'll go ahead and paste it twice. And for these are going to be numbers. So let's go and copy that. All right, so our first one will be ID. And so this is going to be our unique identifier for this monster. And then we're going to go ahead and have our monster ID. And this will be our unique identifier for this monster type. All right, then what we'll do is back in our data manager, we'll need to go ahead and add in those new properties. And so what we'll do is we'll do our ID. And so for our Iguana Knight, we'll go ahead and make this 1. And then for our monster ID, we'll also go ahead and just do 1. And then back in our battle scene, we need to go ahead and update our data for our active enemy monster. And so we'll just give this an ID of 2, and we will do our monster ID of 2. All right, and so by doing that, that's going to set us up for later when we want to go ahead and start moving some of our monster data to a JSON file. And then that way we could have like a JSON file of our various monster types and a general summary of that monster. All right, so now we've added our monster data to our data manager. That actually brings an end to this video. And that actually wraps up our saving and loading section. So next, we're going to go ahead and start working on our monster party and our monster detail scenes. And so what we'll do is we'll start creating new phaser scenes to allow us to see our party of monsters that the player currently has. And from here, the player could select one of those monsters to go into a detail scene where they could see the various stats, the attacks, and other things like that. And later on, this is going to connect over to our inventory scene, and then that way as we use items, we can go ahead and connect that to our party scene so we can use items on those monsters. So as a reminder, there's a link in the description of the video to the complete source code for this video, and as always, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the content. If you did enjoy the video, please consider liking the video and hit the bell icon to be notified when the next video in the series is released. For more great Phaser 3 content, please see the links on your screen now.